Hello and welcome to my channel, Stitches with Love. My name is Elizabeth, and this is where I share all about my knitting adventures, both on and off the needles. And today I am so excited to tell you that this is the first of a series of tutorials on how to knit socks using the double pointed needle method. So if you're curious about knitting socks, maybe you've been knitting for a while and you're looking to expand your skills, maybe you've never picked up a set of needles and you're just curious how socks are made, then grab a cup of something cozy and let's get started. Now the first thing you're going to need to do is assemble everything you need to knit a sock. We're going to use regular sock yarn. Sometimes in the stores, or if you're ordering online, you will see this labeled as fingering, or maybe even light fingering, or fine weight yarn. That is typically what's used to knit socks with. I don't have the label handy, but I'm going to be using a ball of Croy Patterns sock yarn. This is one of my favorite sock yarns. It's very sturdy. It is a blend of wool and I believe nylon. It has a little bit of stretch to it, and it's just a really good workhorse, affordable sock yarn. I buy mine on Amazon simply because it's more convenient and it's easier for me to find online. The next thing you're going to need, because we are doing this method with double pointed needles, you're going to need a set. Now, when I use double pointed needles, I only use a set of 4. I have my stitches on 3 needles, and then I work them off with another needle. So you need a set of 4 double pointed needles. If you're not familiar with double pointed needles, they look like this. Much like a regular needle, but they have a point on each end. You can see. And then you're going to need, maybe it's not a requirement, it's not really something you need, but I highly recommend that you have some kind of locking stitch marker like this. Something that will lock into place. You can also use a safety pin, or if you're in a real pinch, a paper clip that you don't unfold, you just use it. If you're someone who likes to keep track of your work in inches, some patterns will say rows, some will go by inches. For me personally, I prefer to measure my socks by the row count rather than the inches, but if you would prefer to use a tape measure to keep track of your progress, then certainly grab a tape measure too. But I would not consider this to be an absolute requirement. As far as working the leg, you may want to measure your foot or the foot of the person that you are giving these to, just until you get your own rhythm and comfort zone going with knitting socks. Once you've done a few hundred, I promise you're probably not going to need to measure any more feet, and you'll just know what you need. So we're going to start our socks casting on 64 stitches. I'm going to use a size US 2 2.75 millimeter needle. Now, if you're going to use this size needle, then I would recommend using something like the Croy patent sock yarn, or a sock yarn that's a little bit thicker than something that's more fine, because I find that the tension and the gauge work better on this yarn if you're using this needle. If you're going to use something smaller than a 2.75 with a thicker sock yarn like the Croy, just be aware you're going to have a very sturdy sock and it might be a little bit tricky to knit just as far as the gauge goes, because your stitches will be tighter. But again, this is my own personal preference. You will develop your own comfort, your own rhythm for knitting socks, and what you like to do best. So let's go ahead and get started. I would like to note that these tutorials are intended for people who already know the very basics of knitting. If you have never picked up a set of needles in your life, I would not recommend watching this tutorial to learn how to knit, simply because I think it can be very overwhelming and kind of stressful and frustrating. So if you're looking for a tutorial that's going to teach you how to do the basics of knitting, I would recommend that you not start here. All right, we're going to make a slip knot in our yarn. You can do any cast on that you prefer. And actually, I'm going to do my usual long tail cast on, simply because that's my preference. I learned that if you're doing a long tail cast on and you want to be certain you don't run out of yarn, save a tail that's a few inches long. Take your needle and wrap your yarn around half the number of times that you're going to need. In this case, we're doing a 64 stitch sock, so we're going to wrap the yarn around the needle 32 times. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 29, 30, 31, and 32. So you can see I've got all my stitches wrapped. I'm going to remove my needle. Hold on to your yarn. Then you're going to fold it in half. So it looks like this. And then where the end of your tail is, you're going to hold the yarn, and that's where you're going to make your slip knot. Now, this is just the technique I use if I am doing the long tail cast on method, which is my preferred method. You can cast on however you would like. Now we're going to start casting on our stitches. 64 is what we need. I'm dividing them between 3 needles. So I'm going to put 20 on the first needle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Okay, that's my first needle. I'm going to take the second one. I'm going to hold it as I did the first, and I'm going to cast on 24 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 21, 2, 3, and 4. All right, now I have 2 needles with stitches cast onto them. You're now going to take your third and final needle and you're going to do the same thing, but you're only going to cast on 20 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. You can see I had plenty of yarn. This is the tail left over. Didn't have to worry about running out of yarn using the method that I did. Now, I highly encourage you at this point, before you continue, to double check that you have the appropriate number of stitches divided between your 3 needles. You should have on your first needle 20 stitches, 24 on the middle needle, and 20 on your last needle. Grab a cup of something cozy and have a sip, and then I'm going to show you how to join this in the round. All right, now, when you are working in the round, it's very important that your stitches are not twisted, that they're all facing in the same direction, and that you are ready to just get started. So you should see these little ridges on the bottom of your needle here. All of those should be facing down on each needle. Now you're going to form a sort of triangle. Be careful not to use your tail end and that you're using your working yarn to join your stitches together. Now I forgot to note that when you're casting on your stitches, you do not have to cast on to each individual needle. You could absolutely cast all of your stitches onto one needle and then divide them. This is just something that I go back and forth between to keep things interesting, but there's no right or wrong way to cast on. So with your working yarn and your needles held in sort of a triangle, we're going to now join our stitches. You're going to take your working needle and you're going to insert it into the first stitch on your first needle. I know this is kind of awkward because of the way I have my camera, so I'll do the best I can. Get that tail end out of the way there. Just a moment, let me get untangled here first. I'm going to actually trim my tail yarn so it's a little shorter and not getting in my way so much. Just make sure you leave enough to weave in the ends when you're done with your sock. Have a sip of something cozy. And let's begin again. All right. Stitches are not twisted. Those ridges are pointing all in the same direction towards the middle of our triangle here. Take your working yarn and your working needle and begin. Slip your working needle into the first stitch on your first needle and knit. For this tutorial and this particular sock, we're going to do knit 2, purl 2 for the cuff. So knit 2, purl 2. Okay, now for those first couple of stitches each round, I would recommend giving your work just a little bit of a tug to tighten up the first couple stitches, but don't do that with every stitch or you're going to have a cuff that cuts off the circulation. Okay, so just keep your hands comfortable, relax your tension, and just knit 2, purl 2, all the way across to the end of your needle. Okay? I promise that as you continue on, this process of knitting a sock is going to become very relaxing and you'll get your own rhythm developed. And it really will be very enjoyable. One and 2 and purl 1 and purl 2. Okay, you have just worked all of the stitches off of your first needle. You're going to do that 2 more times and go across your middle needle and your third needle. So if you're following along, I want you to go ahead and do that and then come back. All right, so here we are at the last needle. Knit 1 and 2 and purl 1 and purl 2. And then I would give your tail end a little tug just to kind of close up that gap. Take a sip of something cozy and congratulate yourself because you have just completed the first round of your sock. Now what we're going to do is we're going to mark not just the beginning of our round where the tail yarn is. We're going to take our stitch marker, something that locks into place, and we're going to put it in that first stitch on our first needle. Now, this is going to serve 2 purposes. The first is that you're going to be able to tell immediately where in your sock the beginning of your round is. The second purpose of using a marker like this is that if you're somebody who wants to measure by rows, you're going to be able to do so a lot more easily if you have a marker there. You can kind of see, I hope you can see, here's your marker and then that's the first stitch. So you would count up from row 1 and then however many rows you're needing or wanting to make in your round. So now at this point, if you're taking notes or you're writing down how many rows you want to do in your cuff, your leg, etc., I would recommend keeping a notebook next to you where you can keep track of how many stitches you cast on, your needle size. I would also recommend what stitches you're using. So I'm going to just make a note here, knit 2, purl 2, ribbing. Now, as you go along, you're going to be able to look at this and know exactly what you're doing. But if you're new to making socks, I would recommend keeping a notebook handy where you can write down what you're doing so that when you do the next sock, you can do exactly the same thing. You can just look at this and know what needle size you used, how many stitches you cast on, and what kind of pattern you did for the ribbing and the leg. So we're going to set that aside. and we're going to do the next round. Now we're going to start again with knit 2. Okay, so your work looks like this. Take your working yarn, knit those first 2 stitches. Don't move your stitch marker, just leave it right where it's at. And then purl 2, knit 2, and purl 2. And you're just going to continue in this manner all the way around until all of your stitches have been worked. Okay? So if you're following along and you have decided to knit a sock while I am doing a tutorial, I'm going to take a moment away from the camera while you finish this round. All right, so you should have your first 2 rounds done on your cuff now. It should look like this. As you go along, your pattern will show up more as you work those stitches in each round. We're doing just ribbing right now. Knit 2, purl 2. And I think for the purposes of this demonstration, we're not going to do a very long cuff or a very long leg because I want you to not get overwhelmed and I want you to be able to really enjoy the process and just get comfortable with what to do. So we're going to continue doing knit 2, purl 2 every round for 10 rounds. So keep your stitch marker right where it's at, and then once you can count up from here and have 10 rounds on your needles, then go ahead and start the leg. And for the leg, you're just going to do a simple stockinette stitch round and round where you knit every stitch until it is your desired length. I'm going to end here and I will see you in the next tutorial. By then you should have your cuff done and you should have good progress on your leg, and then be ready to start the heel flap and turn. Until next time, happy knitting. Don't get overwhelmed and just enjoy the process. It's worth it. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.